everyone and welcome back to my channel. For those of you who don't know me, my name is Lucy and I'm a fourth year medical student studying at the University of Nottingham. Today's video is all about how to write a personal statement for medicine, and rather than me just reel off loads of tips that you've probably heard elsewhere, I am going to actually take you through how to structure your personal statement and how to plan it, because I really believe that once you've got that initial structure down, it's then a lot easier to just piece the bits together and make it flow and make sure you've got all those buzzwords in there. What I've done is made a template. So what I'll be doing throughout this video is using this template to show you how I structured my personal statement. I didn't make this when I wrote my personal statement, but this is the way that I kind of broke my personal statement down into different sections and how I ensured that I included all the things I wanted to include in it. I spent quite a while actually editing this and making it look pretty, so I really hope it'll be useful for you. You can print off your own copy of this from my Instagram. So my Instagram is LucyBrettX, and in my bio there will be a link and you can find this personal statement template. You can just have a look at it if you want and then draw your own one out, or if you want to actually use this version, then you can export it to a PDF and you can print it out. Okay, so let's start going through each section one by one. So the first section is your little introduction, and that is why you want to study medicine. And I think the key to writing a personal statement is to keep that introduction short, because there is no point you writing a whole paragraph about why you want to study medicine when, let's be honest, your reasoning is probably going to be very similar to everybody else's. You might have some really kind of unique reason, and if you do, then it might be interesting to write about. But I really think your personal statement is about showcasing yourself and your skills and what you've learned and how you know that your decision is really informed. So you don't want to waste time just saying something very generic. So in this first box, just write down a couple of things you want to get across in your intro. So is it that you want to get across the very moment when you decided you want to study medicine, or the first time when you started to consider medicine as a degree and a career? Do you want to mention something personal that has led to you considering medicine? And in my personal statement, my initial sentence was something like, basically, when I was in primary school, someone once said to me, I think you're going to be a doctor one day because that just seems like the kind of person you are. And at the time, I just was like, no, I'm not going to be a doctor. I don't like science, not interested. And so I actually started my personal statement in a kind of unique way by saying that initially I didn't want to study medicine and it wasn't something that interested me. But over a lot of years of getting experience and thinking about it a lot, I then did decide it was the career for me. And so my whole personal statement then became a story about how I got from this point of not really wanting to study medicine to having a real passion for studying it. And if you can structure your personal statement to take the reader on a sort of journey about how you learned more about medicine and how your decision was more and more informed, and then that led to you finally thinking, yes, this is the course for me, I think that makes for a much more interesting read rather than just lots of scattered random thoughts about medicine. But it is entirely up to you. That's just an idea. That's what I did. Obviously, you don't have to start your personal statement by saying you didn't want to study medicine, because that was a very weird way for me to start it. I'm not really sure why I decided to do that, but it obviously worked okay. Okay, so I've dedicated the next section to work experience, and you will see this is one of the biggest sections, and that's because talking about your work experience should be the bulk of your personal statement. Your work experience section is where you're demonstrating that you've not only really thought carefully about this career choice and you've really done all you can to gain as much knowledge as possible to inform that decision, but also that you've actually demonstrated some skills that will be useful in medical school and as a doctor, and you've also tried to grow as a person and you've tried to develop your skills. So you'll see that I've split this section into two columns. In the first column, you just need to jot down what your experiences actually were, just so you make sure you include all the ones you want to include. So you might have only had one set of work experience, you might have had a few. I had, I think, 3 main work experiences that I talked about, and it's very important that you do state what your precise role was and how long you did the experience for and where it was. What looks really good in a personal statement is if you have done long-term work experience, so you haven't just done a few days at a hospital and you've just sort of ticked work experience off the list. You've actually spent like a year, maybe several years, doing a particular experience that has really like informed your decision to study medicine. So if you have done something for 18 months, then write that you have done it for 18 months, because that is really important. And yeah, like I said, say what your actual role was. So were you there shadowing, or were you there actually providing the care yourself? Were you just chatting to the patients? Were you doing their personal care? Were you feeding them? Were you changing the sheets? Whatever it is, say what you were actually doing. And as well, I would say that you really want to put emphasis on those experiences where you have had an active role in the care of someone else. So while shadowing in a hospital is really good, and you should mention it and you should say what you learned from it, you also need to have some experience in there that is about you actually physically doing something actively. So you'll see here, this is just my example writing down the things that I did. So I had a week's work experience in a hospital where I was shadowing. I had about 18 months to 2 years, I can't remember now, but I obviously did know at the time of writing my personal statement, where I was working the weekends at a disabled children's charity, and I also volunteered at a care home for the elderly for 6 months. So once you've filled in that column with all the experiences you want to include, then move over to the other column. And I would argue that this is the most important part of your personal statement, and this is where you're going to reflect on your experiences. So while you might have only written one sentence, absolute maximum, saying what you actually did on the experience, you want to have the several sentences or several lines explaining what you learned from that experience. So rather than saying, I had some hospital work experience and I shadowed a consultant and I saw this surgery and I got to go in this clinic and I talked to this patient and then I got to watch this surgery and I went into this theatre, instead of just reeling off the things you've done, you need to say what you learned from them. So as we are just planning the personal statement here, we're not writing the final draft, just jot down some ideas. What are the key skills that you developed when you were on that work experience, and what are the key lessons that you learned? So if you were volunteering in a care home, maybe you felt like your communication skills improved so much because you were having to really adapt to the way that you spoke depending on the sort of cognitive ability of the resident you were talking to. Maybe you were working in a team on your experience and you had to sort of delegate tasks between each other and you had to prioritize different tasks and manage your time to achieve a goal. Then you want to talk about that. If you are talking about your shadowing experience, then what lessons did you learn? What did it teach you about the life as a doctor? Maybe it taught you the realities of the life of a doctor, and that it isn't all just about saving lives. There's actually a lot of just talking to patients families, and interacting with the multidisciplinary team, doing lots of admin like discharge notes and things like that. Maybe you were presented with a particular ethical scenario that you thought was really interesting and you want to talk about how it opened your eyes to the sort of ethical side of medicine. Or maybe you noticed how patients were treated holistically, so rather than just treating their physical ailment, their social needs and their mental health needs were being accommodated at the same time, and that was something that really stood out to you. Whatever it is, just make sure it's demonstrating that you've really reflected on your experience and you've taken something away from it. You haven't just done the experience to tick a box, and you've also developed yourself as a person. You've grown, you've acquired new skills, you've learned something new. So next we've got a box for other experiences, and I included this because I think this doesn't directly fit into work experience necessarily, but they are sort of experiences that you've undertaken or achievements that you've had that will make you a better medical student, or they've allowed you to gain particular skills or learn about yourself. So you could mention things like if you've done Gold DOV or any of the DOVs, what you learned from them. So DOV, like, I know it's kind of something a lot of people might have done and like a lot of people will have it on their personal statement, but I really do believe that it's an amazing way to demonstrate your teamwork and leadership skills and like your planning ability and organisation skills and stuff. Like, I do think it is a really valuable thing to do, so definitely feel free to mention it if you've done it. And then just other things like if you've done peer mentoring at school or you've been involved in like tutoring younger students. I mentioned that I was involved in like tutoring students a few years below me, and it was really helpful for developing my explanatory skills, so like being able to explain a concept that might have seemed really difficult in a simple way. If you've done any other sort of like charity projects, anything like St John's Ambulance or First Aid or anything at all that you think is relevant, then definitely do mention it. So the next section, now I am not convinced about this section whether you really need it or not. I was always told that for Oxbridge, so Oxford or Cambridge applications, you really need to show sort of an area of academic interest, or you need to sort of show that like research side of medicine that interests you. I don't know if that's a rumour, but to be honest, I think no matter where you're applying in any personal statement, I think it does show your passion for medicine if you're actually talking about active things that you've done to learn more about medicine, because it's very easy to just put on paper, I'm passionate about science or I'm interested in the human body, but have you actually shown that to someone looking from the outside? So here I just put a little box for you to put anything that you have done to learn more about medicine. So it might be you've read books, maybe you read the New Scientist magazine, maybe you've been to a conference, or you've been to a particular exhibition, maybe you've had to undertake a research project at your school, or you've done an EPQ on something that was medically related, or just generally an area of medicine that you just find really, really interesting. I know that in mine I talked about Alzheimer's disease and sort of other types of dementia, and I'd read a couple of books in particular about the genetics behind Alzheimer's disease. I'd then also done some fundraising for Alzheimer's Research UK. So lots of sort of things I'd done sort of came together quite nicely for me to have just a few lines about my interest in Alzheimer's disease. So yeah, I think it's nice to just show off the passion that you do have. However, remember that anything in your personal statement, potentially you could get asked about in an interview. So never ever lie. Don't be one of those people that says that you've read the New Scientist every week for 3 years or whatever. Like, have you actually read the New Scientist? And if you have, don't just write, I have read the New Scientist every week. Write what it is that you actually learned from it. So rather than just stating that you have read it, just talk about the thing you have read about. So you could say, I read about this really interesting new treatment that's being used for Alzheimer's disease in the New Scientist magazine, and that prompted me to then carry out some further research. And then I went on to read a particular book which taught me more. So actually show how you've kind of followed an avenue of research or of medicine, not that you're just kind of randomly flicking through the New Scientist, like, yeah, I'm just flicking through the New Scientist because I want to put it on my personal statement. The main reason why you shouldn't lie in your personal statement isn't just because you could get asked about it in an interview, but it's because you just need to have integrity and honesty. Like, if you're going to medical school, you're going to become a doctor, obviously in all areas of life it's important to be honest, but like particularly if you're going to go down the medicine route and the healthcare route, like being honest, being open, like, is really, really important. So if you're like falling at the first hurdle and you're lying in your personal statement, I just think it's very, you know, it's not a good way to start off the process. Okay, so the next box is about extracurricular activities. So these are all the things that you do outside of school. And one reason why this is really important is because you need to show you are a well-rounded person and you're not just a robot that just studies all day. And that is because when you're in medical school and when you eventually become a doctor, your life might get quite stressful. Your career will be emotionally, physically demanding. And so you need to have those things that you can escape to relieve your stress and to allow you to have a life outside of medicine. And I think that's something that's really important. But also what you can do with this extracurricular section is actually talk about how the skills that you've got from your extracurricular activities will directly be transferable to medical school and will make you a better medical student and a better doctor. So my examples here were sort of sport and music. So I've always had something sporty and something musical in my life. Sport-wise, I have been a competitive runner from a very young age, although I'm more sort of just like a recreational runner now. Growing up, sort of having to train and race and compete required like huge levels of like perseverance and time management, and as well like emotional resilience. Like if I didn't do well, having to bounce back, pick myself up. So skills like that are really important as well for medicine and a career in medicine. So being resilient, having perseverance, keeping at something even if it's not going your way. And similarly, I also played piano and I did singing grades up to grade 7, and rather than that just being something you can like boast about in your personal statement, again, how is it actually transferable to medicine? Well, obviously first off, music was a massive stress reliever and a means of escape, like during exam time or just school in general or any stressful event, but also again it's the commitment, it's the perseverance of working towards something, challenging myself to complete these exams outside of school and to better my musical skills. Yeah, so whatever your extracurricular activities are, just jot them down here just so that you like remember all the different things that you do, because I know a lot of people applying for medicine, they have so many things going on like outside of school. I definitely had loads of random things I did, like I was in a book club for a while, I did choir at school, I was in the debating society, and I wouldn't go overboard. I wouldn't necessarily mention every single thing because then it will just become a list of you just saying all the things that you do outside of school. But if you can just pinpoint a few of the things that you think have been really important to your personal development and have been important for your stress relief and make you you, and also have given you attributes that you will be able to use at medical school, then yeah, choose wisely which ones you want to mention. You don't want this section to be like half your personal statement. You only want this to be like a few lines. The way I've done this template is kind of like the size of the box kind of correlates to how much content you should put into it. So like I said, the work experience section is your biggest section, and these other sections are more sort of small sections. And so finally we get to the conclusion. So like the introduction, you don't want this to be a really long-winded conclusion, reiterating everything you said again, but you do want to just sort of concisely summarize, okay, so based on everything you've just said, why is it that you know that medicine is the right career for you, or you believe it is at the moment? And how do you know that your decision to study medicine has been really well informed? So I think it'd be quite nice to sort of reflect on all of your work experience as a whole and be like, having had experience in hospitals, caring for the elderly, caring for children, has really shown me that this is something I enjoy doing and I find very rewarding. This, coupled with my interest in this particular area of medicine and medicine as a whole, has also strengthened my desire to study medicine. These words are all very cringy, like my passion for medicine and like my desire to study medicine, so maybe try to avoid those, but I'm just saying off the top of my head. But yeah, I think your conclusion is just where you want to, in a few lines, draw everything together that you've said and why this has led to you applying to medicine right now. And if you can sort of end on like a kind of thoughtful, like pensive note, I think that could be quite nice, something to be remembered by rather than just sort of abruptly stopping your personal statement. This is so cringy, but I think I ended mine with a quote from a book that I'd read about medicine and like the study of the human body, and it was something about how like medicine offers a window into all human life, and it's something I often think about and like reflect on, that why medicine is such an incredible career is that you get to see all different types of people and all different stages of their life in all different states. So when they're their most vulnerable, or when they're on top of the world, when they're struggling mentally, they're struggling physically, you get to interact with them and you get to help them. And I think that's something that attracted me to medicine a lot, like the fact that you delve into people and like their experiences and the impact that health has on their life. And yeah, that brings me to the end of this video. So I really hope that this was helpful, and I hope that you find my little template helpful. If you did use it, I'd love to hear feedback and whether you thought it was good. So yeah, just again, remember that you can get this from my Instagram bio. My Instagram is LucyBrettX, so you can print one of these out for yourself, or you can just have a look at it so that you can then jot down some ideas. And yeah, this template has been designed to be used as an initial place for you to just jot down ideas. So it's not where you're going to write your personal statement. You're not going to be able to fit everything into this. And obviously your personal statement is something you need to like draft and redraft over and over again. But I think it's helpful just to like split things up into your head. So rather than approaching your personal statement as just this one piece of prose that you need to write, actually splitting it down into sections and considering each section in turn and just jotting down loads and loads of ideas, even if you can't include them all, because obviously you do have the character count limit. And I had to cut literally like over half my personal statement out. I think it was over double the character limit. So you will need to cut lots of things out probably, but it's better to get all your ideas down and then you can kind of be selective and think, okay, I want to include that, I'm not so worried about including that. And it can also be something you can refer back to. So while you're writing a personal statement, if you suddenly think, actually I want to include something else here, then you can just look back at your original ideas. The last tip I would say is make sure you're using like a breadth of attributes and experiences. So don't just keep saying for every like work experience you did, yeah, this improved my communication skills, because obviously that's important that it did, but you need to talk about like a wide range of things. So not just communication skills, but organisation, leadership, teamwork, empathy, prioritization. There's so many attributes. Basically just try to think of as many attributes as you can that a doctor would need to have, and then look over all your experiences and your achievements and everything you've written and think, where have I shown that? And then you will be on the right track to writing a really great personal statement. So thank you very much for watching. Please remember to subscribe to my channel if you want more videos like this one, and give the video a thumbs up as well if it was helpful. I look forward to seeing any comments you might have, or you can message me on Instagram if you have any questions, and I'll see you very soon for my next video. Bye!